Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Mythic Gaming, I continue my ongoing conversation with Zack McaAtee. Greetings, Zack. How are you?
Doing well yourself.
I'm doing pretty good. I got something from the people at the Whiz Kids who do the Hero Clicks.
Okay.
They, they started the Labors of Hercules. So this one has a mythic Hercules and a mythic Hydra. And the Hydra has detachable heads where you can increase the number of heads.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm not taking it out of the box. It's a collector's thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that's really great, and I'm happy with that. I'm trying to show it to folks at home. Do you use figures during your gaming?
Usually what I do is I pre-print tokens with I really like the pixel aesthetic, like old school video games. So I try to find like pixel art of monsters and characters, and then usually I'll put them onto a token sheet in like MS Paint, print them, laminate them, and then like cut them out and stuff. Um, it has the benefit of also letting me put the character's name on the token. If it's the L5R game, I usually put their name at the top and then kind of their job or title at the bottom so that the players can immediately kind of tell who this person is and how they should be treating them. Um, and then for Pokemon, I have a bunch of dry erase tokens that are really, really useful because there's over 1,000 Pokemon, and having tokens for all of them would be madness.
I actually found a bunch of my Pokemon stuff. I brought some of it over to Tim, and then we found some little plastic Pokemon. God knows when.
Oh, nice.
Maybe that'll wind up Tim's also as well. Yeah, if I could do anything with my computer, I'd probably be doing things like that. So instead, I look for little plastic figurines.
Hmm.
And HeroClix ones used to be very easy to find and very inexpensive. Now they're difficult to find and they've gotten expensive because they're old and they're collector's value.
Yeah.
And I also like using maps. And the
Hmm.
maps aren't exactly what's there, but it's a representation of what's there. So this way I can embellish with details. Because before I use the maps, you would have a hard time conceptualizing where things were, remembering where things were.
Yeah.
So with the map, they can pretty much tell it's there, and I'll point out things of interest if you want to look at it and remember what happens to be in the story. It's easier for them.
That's what I do for maps is I have like a big country map for the Pokemon game that I got printed on like a neoprene gaming map. So we put that in like the middle of the table so that players can look at the map and be like, oh, okay, so we're here, like where do we want to go? Um, and then I got like custom printed grid map that it's I think 1.5 size squares, or it's just under 2 inches because the tokens I have are like a little too big for a 1 inch square. Um, and so like I have that as the combat map, and then occasionally for specific sessions, I'll make like custom maps with I use a website called Incarnate, which has a really good membership program, and like the way they do the maps, it's nice. It's almost all like stamps, I guess is the best way to
Wow.
put it. So you can say, oh, if I want to put trees, there's 30 different stamps of trees in this type, and then if you click and drag, it will like alternate between the stamps, so it's not just a row of the same thing over and over again. Um, Very useful for what I've done. I've used it a lot for the L5R game because that one I've tried to make a lot more like custom materials.
That sounds great. And again, if I had the computer skills, I'd probably be using these programs as well. I usually get maps from the people that make Pathfinder.
Okay.
They publish offers maps and map packs, and the maps are really big. They're very well drawn and colored, and they're pretty adaptable to whatever we do with them. And then a company, I don't remember the company, but they publish these books on Spiral.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few of those books too, and usually between the Spiral books and the maps, I put together just about any terrain and features and structure.
I've seen those for sale a few times, so I've never picked any up.
Yeah, really, really well made. They've gotten expensive also too. The ones I had in line to purchase shot up in price, so I have to rebudget them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's with the L5R game. What's nice is that since this is by now the fifth edition of the game, a lot of quote unquote canon places tend to have maps even from like older editions that I can reference if I need to make a new map. So like um, I've looked back and said, oh, here's an edition two map of this area, and I can't find one for the current edition. So let me use this as a basis to kind of flesh it out, you know. Um, but what I've had the most fun with is taking the spots on the map that like it's just a name and they have never given it any details past the name, and then just kind of making my own thing for it. So like the first arc took place at a small village on the like eastern coast. The name is basically Water Music Village because it's supposed to be named after the sound the rain makes on the bamboo near the waterfall and how it echoes and sounds beautiful like music. And it's just this tiny little spot on the map. The only lore that they have for it is what I just said about how it sounds like music, and that one of the emperors stayed there for like a summer once because it was so beautiful. And that's it. There's nothing else. So for the first arc, what I did is I took every map I could find of the coast, and then kind of using the rough, like fiddly outlines of the coast as a baseline, I then made a map of the village and the castle next to it and everything, and like that's what we used for the first arc. And I'm saying this in the hopes that none of my players are listening. Uh, I have that map in my closet because they may be returning there several times. And even though it's like one of the older maps I made and one of the like least good looking ones, I'm waiting for the kind of like, oh, like as soon as I pull out the map from the first session, you know?
Yeah, that is great. I keep my maps too, and the ones that are more handmade as well, I've kept them uh, because people do revisit. And we had a crisis on Infinite Earths type of thing called the Time Wars
Yeah.
around a decade a few years ago. First moved back to Northern Jersey because I had decades worth of gaming lore. And I just needed to trim it down. So we had the crisis on Infinite Earth storyline and got rid of a lot of the history, but then it's not totally lost.
Yeah. That's I've kept some maps even that like I don't think I'm ever going to use them again just because I had fun like making them. Um, so for their second arc in L5R, they were going to a forest that in the lore it's like spoken of in myth that at night the forest rearranges itself and it's always a different layout every day, so it's really hard to navigate. Um, and I wanted to kind of reflect that some way mechanically and with a map. So what I ended up doing is using Incarnate, the website slash program I mentioned earlier. I made a base level map of like this is the forest floor, and then I got that as like a grid, and then I made this is the tops of all the trees. Like if you're looking down from above and you see all the eaves of the trees, that's what this layer is. Made that grids, and then what I did is I cut those up, and then I made a bunch of randomized tokens of either empty spots, certain NPCs, enemies of mixed groups, and all sorts of things. And what I did is when I printed everything and laminated it, I put all of those on the backside of the forest top tokens. And then I got Velcro stickers, like little Velcro discs, put them on both sides of that token and then one on the map. And the way it worked was when they would enter a space on the map, we said this takes 15 minutes to move from one square to another. And when you do, you take that square, you literally Velcro it off the map, flip it over, and Velcro it back on to see what's on the other side of it.
Wow.
And then as the days went on, I had like my own kind of reference grid of like, oh, the longer they're there, like the more of these enemies that show up. Or on this day, this person is no longer in the forest to be found. Things like that. And, when they explored a specific spot on the map enough times, it would permanently stay face up. So they were always making some progress, and it didn't feel like they were like totally lost every day. Um, and it's such a hyper specific map. I cannot use that for anything else. But I kept it because I was really fond of the like the Velcro tiles and like moving things around like that. And I was just like, I feel like if I throw it away, I'm going to at some point be like, ah, man, I would love to look back at this thing.
That sounds like something you could adapt to. So the technique is something that can be adapted to just about anything that you do. So you might be able to do a newer, updated version of that.
Yeah.
Now, you like The Legend of the Five Rings. You've spoken about that game in Pokemon, spoken about that
Mhm.
as well. Do you prefer original settings or do you prefer adapting already created settings?
So most of my experience has been with original settings. Usually making like my own settings from scratch. L5R is the first game that has like a setting to pull from, but I still end up making almost everything myself. Um, like I said, I'll reference their maps sometimes. If they have a really good map of something, I'll use that. Um, but I don't use any of the pre-printed adventures. I use obviously the monster manual esque type thing to like make monsters from there. Um, but mostly with L5R, I kind of use it as inspiration. I like to read through the various histories and stuff on the wiki to find things that sound interesting, maybe things that weren't expanded upon, like maybe there was a plot thread that came up and never got resolved, and then using that to kind of make my own stuff. So I suppose roundabout way of saying I do prefer either making my own setting or putting my own spin on a setting.
That's how I've heard as well. I used to like running things aside from mythical settings in the Hyborian age of Conan.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many portals to the Hyborian age that how do I balance them and establish canon? That was a challenge in the beginning. Then I just made everything that exists about Conan, be it in comic book, in book form, short story form, video game, cartoon, as stories that are being told.
Okay.
So these are all stories that people you could hear in taverns or in campfires in the forest at night. So it, something happened, but it might not be exactly what is told in the tale or how it's told in the tale. And this way, I can use things that I can put twists on them, as well as
Yeah.
my own things, as well as adapting again with unique spins. Some of the Conan tales to show that things didn't quite happen the way that the authors described it. And I found that that provided the most enjoyment and versatility, and it was still like a authentically Conan type of experience.
Yeah, yeah, I like that idea a lot, like making everything folklore effectively. Because of course the tale grows in the telling, and then that gives you all sorts of room in between to, like you said, point out the like quote unquote truth of what happened.
And again, the truth is sometimes stranger than the other fiction. And Conan, this author, Robert E. Howard, he corresponded and was friends with H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
That provided a door to the whole Cthulhu multiverse and horror. I didn't really get, I don't know if I shared the story with you, but when I was in my 20s, I guess, and working in human services, there were other people who were into the same type of literature that I was into and gaming. And they kept trying to get me to read Lovecraft. So I was given an anthology and I just randomly opened up and it was about these people that were in a house and there was like some unnameable horror and they dug a hole in the basement and found the elbow of a giant and they all went crazy. So I decided I didn't, Lovecraft wasn't my thing. So it took a bit more convincing for me to try another story. And fortunately, the second tale was in the Dreamlands, which I'm from.
Mm.
So I became a fan of Lovecraft through the Dreamlands, the second story I ever read. Have you ever adventured in Lovecraftian climes?
I think I've played, I would say 3 or 4 Call of Cthulhu like one shots at RPG conventions. I've never really gotten to do like a big campaign in any cosmic horror setting, but um, I've done one where it was Call of Cthulhu as the setting, but the idea was we were exploring the sunken ship of the Titanic. We were funded by a rich guy, and there was some relic that he wanted to find, so on and so on. And it turns out that obviously he had a connection to the deep ones, and he was trying to effectively make a business deal with them to like let them to give them benefits to attacking like the land and stuff like that. And in exchange, he would get immortal life from Dagon and stuff. Um, that was a really fun concept. I liked that one a lot. Um, they were like killer like mermaids effectively instead of like frog people. He made them more like weird twisted like clownfish sirens and stuff like that. Um, I played one that was actually just werewolves, which it was an interesting choice because there are like World of Darkness is right there, but it was a Call of Cthulhu game where the enemies were just werewolves attacking some like townsfolk in like the 1920s. Um, my favorite, my cousin Harry, who's the one who got me into RPGs as a hobby, he ran a game after the second Origins I went to that it was very like 1950s black and white, like sci-fi horror. Like you picture like the posters that have like the giant text. It's like you won't believe, like that kind of stuff. I think it was called like The Day the Meteors Fell, and then he set it in the Pine Barrens because we were all roughly familiar with the Pine Barrens because we're mostly all from Jersey, and the idea was we were a group of teens who drove out to the Pine Barrens, and aliens came down in meteors, and the military that was there got taken out, and we're the only ones there, and very, very again leaning into that aesthetic, hardcore. Uh, my character was I picked Biter was his nickname, and he was like the classic greaser, like the leather jacket, the coif bag hair, the very like no rules, I don't care kind of guy. Like it was a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun. And what was it about the Rings saga that drew you in and kept you there?
For F5R?
The Legend of the Five Rings.
Yeah, yeah.
What was it about that saga that? Because again, you experiment a lot with different settings and different games, but that's something that you return to. What kept drawing you back?
So I've always had a like soft spot for like ninja specifically as a kid, and so it's always been a thing where like I was like, oh, this video game has like ninjas, or this anime has ninjas, that kind of thing, and that's what had originally gotten me to pick up the core book the fourth edition core book when I found it at a yard sale way back, uh, and then when I was going on a trip to Utah at this point, I think 3 years ago. Um, I was like, oh, like I let me get some books to read for the flight, and like there's gonna be a lot of driving and stuff. And I don't remember if it came up as an ad or something similar, but somehow one of the L5R fiction novels came up on my radar. And I was like, okay, this sounds like it'd be an interesting like thing because I remember the universe was pretty fun and everything. It was at the time 2 book series. There was a third one released a few years afterwards. And so on the flight out, I read through that, the first book, and got halfway through the second book. Um, and we were going to a convention in the area, and there's a lot of game stores and stuff. So then I went and like I was like, you know what? Let me get some of the RPG books to just again. I'm going to be on this trip. I'm going to have a lot of time to read. So I picked up like the core book, the Shadowlands, and Court of Stone. Um, and then I read through those on the trip. And then if I wasn't reading those, I was looking at the wiki because I had just found out that there was a massive fan made Wikipedia of all the lore from the older editions. And like reading through that and hearing, oh, this is like amazing, this story, and then finding out that all of it was mostly based off of like the player decisions in tournaments.
Oh, wow.
I think that's what really like got that hook to stick in me, because it's like this is a bespoke universe that was made by the fans, um, and so the idea of being able to contribute to that, even in some unofficial way, on my own table, so to speak, um, it really appealed to me, like joining that universe.
Yeah, with me, the universes that I liked was mostly, again, the ones that I was familiar with in literature. So the Hyborian Age, and then later on the Dungeons and Dragons books that came out. I liked R.A. Salvador's Drizzt saga.
Mm,
That was kind of like the Lord of the Rings, but for a higher age group than the Lord of the Rings. And again, it was there was a lot of interesting lore. It intersected with other lore. There were enough contradictions between editions and commonalities between editions to weave stories. And every now and then, when whatever else we were doing was going stale or we needed a break, I would run a campaign set in the Forgotten Realms, usually in the Frozen North.
okay.
And this way I could play with the characters from the books and introduce them into the stories to a greater or lesser degree. And like anything else, because again, there are many portals and there are game modules and so forth. There was not total agreement on very much, although generally there was. So it left a lot of ambiguity, and I played with the ambiguity. But for me, it was I don't get to play very often. I think I've only played a handful of times as a player.
Yeah.
I was the game master always, because I had the patience to read the books and try to figure out the system,
Yep, yep.
do the research, and come up with scenarios with all sorts of things that might happen that never happened. The players usually do things that are very surprising and throw whatever plans we've made into the garbage.
Yeah, and it's the way that I look at it when I like do stuff for my games. I describe it as I don't plan, I prepare. So the lens that I try to look at it through is more what would happen if the players did nothing, rather than trying to be like, well, this is what I want the players to do and this is what's going to happen. I kind of make that baseline of like, if they weren't involved, here's what might happen like with this NPC, and here's how this situation might have resolved itself if they never noticed it. And then using that, it's a lot easier to see how they can affect and change the story, because it gives me that baseline in my head to like deviate from, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I usually think in terms of the bigger story as well, and just modify what they're doing to take them to some of the same conclusions that they'll need to figure out the puzzles or the challenges later on in the game.
That's what puzzles and stuff. I'm a big fan of open-ended puzzles. So I very rarely will put in any kind of puzzle that only has a single answer, because I know like you always get the advice of like any clue you want someone to find, you need to like beat them over the head with it to make sure they notice and all that kind of stuff. So I always like to leave a little wiggle room for the players to interpret things in a way that I didn't expect. Um, because I mean, what's the fun in just sitting there and gloating as they can't figure out the obtuse answer to this riddle that I made? Like, I want to see what they can come up with.
A lot of storytellers have difficulty with that. They forget that they're there to provide a good time for the players.
Yeah, it's I've never really had the adversarial mindset, because I have seen like people talk about that where it's the DM's like, oh, he's constantly got to one up the players, or like he's only happy if like they're losing encounters. But the whole point is we're here to tell an enjoyable story together.
Yes,
You can't have it be enjoyable for just one person, or you won't have people to tell the story with. Like,
right. Yeah, I'm of the same mind, and if it's an adventure we're having together, and I'm there to kind of structure it and make it as real as possible for them as they react to my descriptions.
yeah,
Um,
I
Where do you
think,
picture the hobby going?
what was that?
Where do you see the future of the hobby going? Like right now, the graphics on the computer and on gaming systems are cinematic. So, and we have artificial intelligence now, so they're going to become even more cinematic. Where do you see the hobby going?
I'm hoping that it doesn't lean too much into like the AI aspect. I think that a big part of this hobby and what makes it something that draws so many people to it is that it is essentially a creative outlet. It's like 100%. This is a creative outlet. So I do hope that we stay towards that like human element of it in things as they move forward. So I think co-opting our creativity to AI, it kind of defeats the point. Um, but as far as like where we might go with tech or how the hobby might develop, I think a trend we've been seeing in the past, even just decade, but probably like 20, 30 years, is how much easier it is for people to A, find people to play with, and B, make their own games. Because like it used to be, you pretty much only had the big name games to choose from because people were not going to go out and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and get a text edited, get graphic design done, get things published. But now we have things move to a point where you can literally put it all together yourself and just be like, I'm not even going to try and go to a publisher. I'll just put this online for like a dollar 50 or something. And then if anybody wants to play it, that's great. And so I think if we keep moving in that direction with more accessibility and like openness in the platform, that's what I hope for. Um, like, I mean, as someone who's been in the hobby for longer than I have, like, I'm sure that you can agree that just the sheer number of people in the hobby has grown astronomically over the past decade or two.
Yes, it has, and I've found again by experimenting with different systems throughout the years, and with sharing these experimentations with other people, that what worked for me finally was a very simple system. It resolved everything with the dice roll, just one, and comparing
Yeah,
to adding some modifiers every now and then. But everyone knows exactly what happened because due to somebody performing a certain action or whatever. And I found that whenever I had complications like other rules, and sometimes people want more rules, so I'll gladly add them from whatever system they want. After a month and a half, we'll ask to go back to the simple system. This way,
yeah.
this way, because the goal before was using the dice to help tell a story rather than doing math and having math fights.
So I know I've briefly talked about Nine Lives to Valhalla before. I can't remember if I went over the actual mechanics in the game. Um, so as a like two-sentence refresh, it is a world set after the Age of Man, in the Age of Beasts, and you play as black metal death Viking cats. Think more Puss in Boots than like anthropomorphic cat person. Like it's more like that like folk tale esque kind of living animal. Um, you only have, I think, four stats, and they each get assigned a die value when you make your character. You A, only roll dice if something is going to die, and B, every time you roll dice, that's how you determine who dies in that encounter. If the player rolls higher, they kill the enemy and describe how they do so. If the DM rolls higher, the enemy kills the player and the DM describes how they do so. If you tie, then you both die somehow and you collaborate on the description. And it's a super simple system, but it works because you're expected to die multiple times. You have 9 lives. Every time you die, you come back with a new feat until your final death when you go up to Valhalla. Um, so it's a very, very quick dice resolution system. In most cases, it's a single die versus a single die. As players get more powerful, they might get feats that let them add extra dice. Certain enemies will have abilities that they can roll multiple dice. But I think it's always just high number. and the most I think I've rolled is like 4 or 5 dice for like the final boss of the module I wrote. So it's extremely quick to resolve.
Yeah, mine is a little bit different than how things are solved, but it's on that level of simplicity. Pretty
What
much,
is that? Yeah, yeah. Could you explain it a bit more?
it's you could use any dice, six-sided dice or 20-sided dice. 20-sided are the most popular because they're cool
Yeah.
people and different. And then it's just I assign like values that when they compare the numbers, again, it's simple subtraction. In addition, if there are modifiers, then you compare the numbers and whatever number came out the highest wins.
Hmm.
But the the higher or the lower in the range, it describes to what extent something happened.
Okay.
So essentially, you could fail miserably or fail to certain degrees. Nothing happens, or you can succeed beyond your wildest expectations, or you just succeed to various degrees. So it'll tell you like immediately what the result of your roll was. It's adjusted by the circumstances. So nobody needs to question what happened. And the kids find that very easy. You learn how to play it in like 5 minutes, and by the end of the session, everybody knows all the nuances because they've come up countless times. So that's what I do, and I'll play with it, I'll fidget with it. I've tried incorporating coins and last feeds and all sorts of things to give it some spice and variety, and co-created systems and magic. But it requires a lot from the player too, with their imagination, to create their character and what the character has and where the character's been. So it's not the result of random dice roll. They can tell a more personal story, a more private story, a story that has more meaningful.
Yeah, I like that. And it's like anything that gets the players to be more creative is a bonus in my book. Um, it's like I feel like, especially for new players, newer people to the hobby, they might get the idea that like, oh, the DM is the only one who gets to do creative stuff. It's like, no, 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 no. The whole thing is it's supposed to be everybody is, and so anything that like gives players that little bit of like narrative power, I feel like is really good.
Also have a rule that it's possible to, regardless of what setting my game's in or who they're facing, it is possible to get through the entire adventure without shedding any blood.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of people like shedding blood.
Yes.
So again, the rules work for them as well. But it is possible to resolve any and all situations I've put in there without shedding any blood. And it's more rewarding to figure out creative solutions to the problems. And so some of them get that after a while, where they no longer have to kill things and take their stuff.
Yeah.
When you create a game, what type of things do you like to put in it?
So, as a general thing, I love mythology. So, anytime I can incorporate either like a real world mythology or make something in the game, I always try to include that, even if it's like just for me. Like in the Pokemon game, they don't really deal with the folklore and mythology of the land that often, but it's all there for me as a reference to do fun stuff with. Um, I am particularly fond of I guess shades of gray solutions is a good way to put it. So I don't like the idea that the only quote unquote good way to resolve something is this one specific way, and that's the only way that you guys get rewards. So like when I make my random quests and such, I will always put a minimum of two possible rewards they could get from different parties depending on how they approach the quest. So maybe in one angle they end up working with like an official in some capacity, and maybe that person gives them a reward. But if they work with this other person who maybe isn't doing things legally, but is trying to do things right, they would get different rewards. And they don't know ahead of time what the rewards are. So they can't sit there and game it mechanically. They just have to decide narratively what they think is the better choice.
That sounds really, really great. I like giving them things they expect mixed with things they didn't expect.
Yeah.
So
What's
I
your favorite example?
I use mythology also, and this way the kids read the myths to figure out ways of fighting the monsters or facing these certain challenges. But I'll put a little tweak in there. So I had to meet the Hercules of Thebes, the mythical Hercules, during one of the adventures, and they had this. They had to go into a cavern and find Medusa and try to win her over to the side of the Olympians. Now that the Python and the Echidna are free, and they've been going after the monsters who've been wronged by the Olympians. So I had in my mind, what if I make the Hercules they met? This group hadn't met the Hercules before. What if I make them the Hercules from Marvel Comics?
Okay.
Boisterous and loud and not very subtle at all.
Yeah.
So they're trying to quietly work their way through the cave, and Hercules, I am here, the brave Hercules. Who will dare face me? And continuously making a lot of noise that will draw the monsters, for lack of a better term, the enemies, the people they're trying to make friends with or speak to. So that would be a one example from a recent game. Or something that worked on one Cyclops, for instance, might not work on a Cyclops who's slightly smarter. So they need
Yep.
Cyclops. It's stupid. We'll give it an answer like my name is nobody, or no one. And that doesn't work because the Cyclops is more on the ball than the public use.
I think that's a good way to handle things is because you already get that baseline of they like know enough of the story to be like, oh, okay, it's this, and then you get to kind of pull the rug out from under them.
Yeah, because again, I treat all my NPCs and PCs as individuals. So just because one Cyclops in the story is not that, doesn't mean that all Cyclops are not that right. In fact, Hephaestus has Cyclops that's helping him make the weapons of the god in his forge on Lemnos. So, and I'm looking at the clock. Wow, we went through this fast. I enjoyed this, and I'd like to do this more often, Zach.
Yeah,
So
yeah, just like talking about the craft, so to speak.
yeah, we'll make a show, and so we could invite other people to speak. I'm sure you have plenty of friends who are also storytellers or game masters or dungeon masters, and we could evolve it.
Yeah, yeah.
So we will talk. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. I really enjoyed speaking to you. I missed speaking to you guys. And how can people reach you?
So you can always find me on Facebook, or you can send me an email at mrmunnin@gmail.com.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks to all the listeners. Until next time, this is us wishing you joyous journeys and amazing adventures. Good night, everybody.